Good evening. Good evening and welcome to the Center for Jewish History. My name is Annie Polland. I'm the Executive Director of the American Jewish Historical Society. And we are so excited to premiere GI Jews, this wonderful documentary that was made in part in a way that's connected to this very building. Attached to this complex is a tower that has 5 miles of archival documents that tell the story of the Jewish people. It's the largest collection of Jewish historical materials outside of Israel, one of the largest in the world, of course. My organization, the American Jewish Historical Society, has collections, including from the National Jewish Welfare Board, the National Jewish War Board, that has photos and documents that went into the making of this documentary. So our connection is so vital. In addition, our board member, historian Deborah Dash Moore, wrote an award-winning book, GI Jews, that was also so important for the making of this film. So it's wonderful to welcome the film back to the center and to share it with you. My question for you this evening is, how many of you had a relative or you yourself served in World War II? Wonderful. So what I think is so joyous about this event is that we're not just watching it on our TV screens, but we've come together as a community to watch it together. And I hope that your connection to this community extends beyond the viewing of the film. At the American Jewish Historical Society, in the records that I just mentioned, we have a card catalog of Jewish soldiers who served in World War II. Now, we don't have the cards for all of the 550,000 American Jews who served in World War II, but we do have close to 100,000, and it's possible that your story is connected to ours. Even if you don't find your card that tells a story of your soldier, the documents and the photos that are in our collections will help you understand that part of your family history even better. So I'm going to come back after the film and invite the director, Lisa Ades, and several people who were very important in the creation of the film to have a little bit of a conversation and to open up the conversation to you as well. But without further ado, I want to welcome you to this showing of GI Jews. I'd like to invite Lisa Ades, Dr. Elihu Rose, and Sergeant Alan Moskin to please come. Lisa, that was a beautiful film. You've directed so many films about New York, Miss America, The Way West. What is it about this film? What brought you to this film at this point? And how was this film different for you as a director than the films that you've done before?
Those are all great questions. But first, I need to just acknowledge some of the extraordinary veterans and people who are in the film who are here. Alan Moskin. Lester Tanner, would you stand up to tell the Roddy Edmonds story? Roddy Edmonds' son, Chris Edmonds, is here tonight. Pastor Chris Edmonds. and our great narrator, Mark Zeisler. It's very hard for me to sit here and not be able to just thank some of the people in the audience. There's so many donors who are here tonight who made this film possible. I just want to thank the NEH, Corporation for Public Broadcasting, WNET, our presenting station, Leslie Norman and Steven Segaler, who have been so wonderful. Some of the filmmakers who made the film with me are here tonight. Amanda Bonavita, my co-producer, Maia Harris, our writer, George O'Donnell, our editor, and so many more. I'm sure I'm forgetting lots, but I just had to say that. Okay. What brought me to this film? I was working on another project where I had interviewed Jewish Americans, and they started to tell stories about their World War II experience, and I was really astonished by what I had heard, the anti-Semitism they experienced in the barracks, down south. Just so many extraordinary stories about what it was like to be a Jew and fighting in this war. And going over to Europe and the German Jews who we ended up meeting. And we decided that it was time to make this film. It was actually a story that had never been told in a comprehensive way. And we just set out one by one to try and tell these stories. The challenge as a filmmaker was we're tackling a subject, World War II, that has been told many, many times in many different films. And we had all these extraordinary stories from Jewish Americans about their experience, but how do you create a coherent narrative about what you've ended up seeing on screen? It was really George O'Donnell, our amazing editor, when we went to him and we said, how can we do this? Are we telling a story of World War II? Are we telling a story of Jews? How do we do this, and how do we do it in 90 minutes or less? And he said, why don't you just pick the 10 best stories that you have and go from there? And so, like any filmmaker, I picked the best 20 stories, and we went from there, and then tried to weave the story of the war around that. And
the story, in terms of the narrative, one of the things that struck me as I was watching the film is the way in which you do have a narrative, yet at the same time you feel you've preserved this real intimacy, so that when you have people talking about their segments or their stories, in the audience you feel like the person is telling you his or her story, so that there's this beautiful balance between taking the story from the United States to Europe, back again to the United States, yet for us as the viewers, I felt that I was in a similar position as you were filming in such a way, although of course I know there was so much work with all of the editing, but it's just a beautiful film.
Thank you. But it's also a testimony to the veterans themselves and the stories they told and how they tell it. I mean, Lester and Alan, and I have my hanky. I mean, I've seen this 100 times and I still cry at exactly the same place.
Dr. Rose, I know that you're a military historian. There's probably so much you could tell us about the battles, and the narration throughout and the interviews throughout were so enlightening in the film itself. But what struck me the most was thinking of you as a young boy saying goodbye to your cousins, your brother, and that beautiful letter from camp. And I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what it was like on the home front for American Jews.
That in itself, first of all, by definition, you'd have to be real old to remember that. I have my older brother with me, who was in one of those little film clips. The big point is that it's very difficult for anybody in this room, except the veterans, the people who lived through it, to remember the total commitment of America, the total unity. We've never lived through a period like that before. The Korean War, they called the Forgotten War. It kind of came and went. We know this, the opposition to the Vietnam War and the way we treated the veterans. The Gulf Wars were not, they never got the totality of involvement. Everybody was involved in World War II. Everybody. As a school child, we saved scrap metal. We brought newspapers. I don't know why. We collected newspapers. We were told they were useful in making some military something or other. Every suburban home had a garden, a victory garden. There was rationing. As little kids, we saved stamps, which we bought for 5 cents a piece, put them in a book until we got $18.75, and that brought a $25 war bond. You paid $18.75, and in 10 years, you got your $25 bond. People would give them as bar mitzvah gifts, and they would give them as birthday gifts. But what I'm getting at is the totality of involvement. There must have been some opposition to the war, but it was minuscule. I mean, nobody ever recognized it. So it was a total experience involving everybody. I mentioned in the film, first of all, for a young person, everybody you knew over 18 years old was in the service. Uniforms were everywhere. You'd go to Grand Central Station or you'd go to Penn Station, nothing but uniforms. When I said that all 6 of my older cousins, including my brother, and I mentioned my cousin Anna was the only woman soldier we knew. But the point was, and the point to absorb here for this audience, is the fact that the war involved everybody, every single person you knew.
Yeah, so the American identity at the time was more united in a sense.
Definitely. Yeah. If there was ever a time that the country was united, boy, it was then.
And Sergeant Moskin, there were 2 moments, I mean, there were so many moments in the film that were moving, but the 2 that were most interesting to me were the interview early on, or the story you told early on about being in the South and the way in which the fellow soldiers made fun of the photo that you had of the basketball team with the African Americans and others. And then the other moment was at the end where you talked about your Jewish identity and how that came out when you were at the camp, and that you spoke in a language that wasn't your own, but the closest you could get to Yiddish to tell them that you too were a Jew. So there were these 2 moments that kind of crystallized your belief in American identity, which should that it be more inclusive than what you were seeing in the South, but also your Jewish identity coming out. And I'm wondering now, as you speak to students, is it that you speak to students these days about the experience? What you want to be sharing with them, and what are the questions that they're asking you that keep inspiring you to talk about this experience?
Before we get to that.
Please.
Oh, I'm sorry. I usually project pretty good. I don't know if the rest of you saw something with when he's talking about the difference in inflation, so to speak, today. I saw the New York Times, and up on the top it said 3 cents. I tell my daughters that, they say, oh, come on. I want them to see that when they see it in Charleston, but The one thing I want to emphasize, and I'll get to the questions in a minute. I'm a retired attorney, so I'm a blabbermouth, so bear with me. Like Mr. Morgenthau. The patriotism was so strong in World War II. When I speak at all the schools, I try to bring back to these young people the love of country that we had back then. After the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, guys were running to the draft board. But before they were of age, lying, phoning birth certificates to get in. And when I tell a lot of the young people, not a lot, but quite a few, they look at me like, why did you can get killed, you know, why they wanted to go into the service? It's the way they say it that I shouldn't be disturbed, but I am. Because I don't feel, and I'm generalizing now, but I don't feel the love of country that we had back then. And just very briefly, I'll say, to those who don't know, for 50 years I didn't speak to anybody about my experiences in combat as a liberator. I'm sure I had PTSD. Nobody knew about PTSD in World War II. We never heard that term. They would just go shell shock or battle fatigue, didn't know how to treat it. My General Patton didn't believe in any neurological, he called it malingering garbage, and I can't use the four-letter words that he spouted out, but so he said, suck it up. So we all sucked it up, and I sucked it up for 50 years. Until I moved up to Rockland County, where I live now, and a lady at the local Holocaust Museum begged me to speak, said, try it once, and June 10, 1995, a day I'll never forget, I spoke for the first time, and baby, it was like a catharsis. It was like, whew. I went on for an hour, and it was good for me, and apparently good for the audience, because I've been a busy, busy boy since then. Been to about 13 different states and 60,000 students all over the United States. And the main thing I try to get across is not to hate. You know, we saw the hate with the Hitler Jugend, and we saw the hate with the Waffen-SS, and I couldn't understand then where that hate came from, what I saw in the concentration camps. And by the way, I have to apologize to Lisa, because after I saw the screening up at Pleasantville, it wasn't the same as I saw tonight, and I'm in it a little bit more now, so I feel a little more. I told my daughters, I'm not in it much, but I'm in it a little bit better now, so. What is that all about? There's two different, whatever they did, but I thought, I like tonight's much better. But, now let's get back to the questions you asked me.
You know, I just wanted to say, talking about patriotism, one of the things that was amazing were how many men enlisted. I mean, obviously women enlisted. They weren't drafted, so, but so many of them, including the great Robert Morgenthau, who is here tonight. He would stand up, who enlisted, became an officer, naval officer, and
the Navy doesn't count.
and after his ship was bombed, and they told him, you know, anyone who wants to go home, you can. He didn't. He went back, and that kind of bravery is just something that is really extraordinary. So thank you for being a part of this film.
I know there are probably many people who have questions you'd like to ask. We'd like to open this up to you. We do ask that you wait until you get the microphone, just so that we can ensure that all can hear you. But Shirley has the microphone, so if you just want to raise your hand, we can take questions.
You know, I always tell the students, to get the first one to get up is always a problem. I didn't think it'd be with adults also. Everybody waits for the first one. I'd like to see an upstander. I tell the kids to be upstanders, not bystanders. Got too many bystanders. I'm not a bystander. Got something to say, shoot it.
We have someone.
Hi. I just had a question for the veterans. I'm wondering, at the same time that you were serving and you were dealing with, some anti-Semitism within the military or at the training base, were you also hearing about efforts by the Committee for a Jewish Army to recruit American Jews to serve in the Jewish Legion? Because that was being formed at the same time, and I know that that a lot of young American Jews who were too young to enlist here lied about their age to join the Jewish army that was fighting overseas. I'm wondering if you had any experiences with your non-Jewish comrades where they were, supportive or critical of that, or.
I want to just add one thing. What I got out of these interviews, by the way, at least mine was done a couple of years ago, and I'd almost forgotten about it till Lisa got in touch with my children about pictures and all kinds of stuff. But the thing that I got out of this, and I would hope this was part of her and her co-people motivation, was that the Jews did fight for the country. That was the old stereotype years ago. Well, the Jews were in the quartermaster corps, and I got a lot of that stuff way back. Jews didn't fight for the country. And I got that even from fellow veterans who, after they have a few drinks, would make the usual jokes about the yids and this and that, and no one disturbing. But I like the fact that they brought out here that Jews did fight for the country and the love of country. And that's the part here that really moved me, in addition to a couple other things, that story about Roddy and his son is here, and that gets me in the gut every time I see it, about what he did to say we're all Jews here. That's the kind of camaraderie we had in the service, and he brought it out so explicitly. I mean, Jews fought for the country. Jews love this country. I tell these kids all the time up in Bedford and Armonk and all these fancy places with their fancy homes, how lucky they are. I tell their parents every day. Kids are going to outhouses, don't know where their next meal is coming from. They should love this flag and love this country. I try to get that across to all these kids every time I speak. And I love the idea what they did about Jewish Americans, although, I don't want it to be just Jewish Americans. I mean, I might add one other thing. In combat, I never got into that garbage about anti-Semitism. I loved every guy in my 71st Division. I think they felt the same about me. All we cared about, you protect my right flank, I'll protect your left flank. We don't care if you're black, white, pink, Jewish, Catholic, Muslim, whatever. Do your job. It was only in the South, in basic training in the 40s, it was rough in the South. I had a couple of Southern boys from the Coast Guard Academy. When I spoke up there, they didn't take kindly to what I said. I said, look, you guys weren't even born then. I'm not putting the sins of their grandfathers on you, but that's how it was in the South. It was rough. And the part that I had difficulty with is, as I said, these guys on my side, we got to go fight the bad guys, and they're talking about Jews and blacks, and that was very disturbing for a young 18-year-old kid. I had to get over it, and I did. But in combat, none of that stuff existed. I loved every one of the guys in my outfit, and I'm just one of the lucky ones. I'm sitting here talking to you.
Lisa.
If I was 100 meters to the right or the left, I wouldn't be here. We all went through a lot of that guilt, which I don't want to get into now. I'll go wacky again.
All right.
Well, it's not funny. You see guys walking around, and it's...
All right, could we go on?
Okay.
Yes, we have a question in the back.
Lisa, I know you a long time. I think you'd like to let the audience...
Hi, Ed.
Hi. I think you'd like to let the audience know how long it took you to make this film.
It took about 5 years. Yeah, right, Amanda? Is that correct? Once we had the idea, we applied to the NEH for a development grant, and it's slow going. It takes a long time to make these films.
Before I ask my question, I just want to say that my uncle was a chaplain in one of the 311 Jewish chaplains, and my mother was a U.S. Army nurse in Europe, and my dad was in Europe in the Signal Corps. But my question is, we didn't get to see the credits at the end, and I was curious about the moving images. Were they from the National Archives, from the Signal Corps that were taken, or where did you get the moving images, the old images that you incorporated in the film?
There are dozens and dozens of archives that you would have seen in the end credits. They come from, some do come from the National Archives, the Holocaust Museum in DC, the place that we're sitting right now.
The American Jewish
American Jewish Historical Society. Producer Amanda Bonavita oversaw all of the archival research and acquisition, and she uncovered a ton of gems. And the Hollywood director, what is his name? George Stevens, shot the amazing service at Dachau with Rabbi Chaplain Eichhorn and some of the color footage that you saw in the film. So, yeah, it came from many, many sources.
Sources is a good place to end this conversation because it gives me the opportunity to welcome you back here to do research and to find whatever it is you're looking for that relates to Jewish history. We do have a reception outside. It is kosher for Passover, so you don't have to worry about it. So that might be good for some people and bad news for other people. But I want to take this opportunity to thank WNET, thank Shirley for putting this program together, thank
you,
Lisa,
Shirley.
Thank you, Dr. Rose, and thank you, Ellen Austin.